Welcome everybody. I'm going to get started since it's 11:02, 11:03 Pacific. And today we're going to be talking about the future of legal work. So it's great to have everybody here. We see everybody joining as we're talking here. So welcome, welcome. Thank you. I'm joined today by Evan Wong, who is the co-founder and CEO of Checkbox, which is a global legal tech company used by corporate legal teams, a favorite of UpLevel as well. And some of those legal teams are SAP, BMW, and Pepsi. And Evan, who has been a dear friend of ours, a good friend to UpLevel, and a personal friend of mine. Evan has a legally trained background, and he spent his career building companies and technology, which has won him numerous awards, including being named a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree and the Legal Tech CEO of the Year. In an effort to make us all feel like underachievers, at the age of 17, Evan founded Hero Education, an award-winning education company that has positively impacted thousands of to-be adults. His entrepreneurial journey has since evolved into a mission to empower legal and compliance teams to do more meaningful work through AI and workflow automation. Checkbox's innovative no-code platform allows everyday professionals, not just IT teams, to automate legal processes like intake, matter management, all using drag and drop technology. And in his personal time, Evan enjoys martial arts. That's something we have in common, volleyball, and he's known for his enthusiastic participation in amateur karaoke and dancing, which he's threatened me with someday we're going to do together. And he also enjoys giving back and enabling the next generation of entrepreneurs through mentoring and other founders privately with organizations such as the Founders Institute, where he was recognized as the highest rated top mentor, which is no surprise. Evan, welcome. It's great to have you.
Oh my goodness. I think that is the most impressive introduction that I've ever had. So thank you for doing that. I'm glad to be here.
You
Thanks
are
for hosting
welcome.
as well. Um,
Well, you're an impressive person, so you deserve that introduction.
no, thank you. And I think for people who aren't on this, who are on this call and haven't met Steph before, Steph is, of course, one of the co-founders of Clock and is now also a co-founder of UpLevel. She also was able to start, I think, Link Up, which has recently, is it public news yet? Am I allowed to announce this or no, not yet?
Not,
Okay, great things are
I will
happening.
say it's something very big is happening. It is official. It's done. We're just not supposed to be announcing
Okay,
it yet, but wink, wink. But it's coming out. There will be some big news in like 3 weeks. So we're going to make a big splash.
awesome, awesome. So I'm really glad to have the
Big plans
conversation
for
with you as well, Steph.
2025.
Yeah, exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, so tell us, Evan, let's dive right in. And by the way, if anybody, I think it's okay for me to say if anybody has any questions or comments, please use the chat. We'd love to hear from you and we can pause and answer questions as we go along, if that's okay by you, Evan.
Yeah, would love to.
Perfect. So let's talk about a little bit about the changing landscape of legal operations in general, which we've seen some pretty drastic changes over the last year, certainly. How has the legals industry approach to intake and reporting evolved over the past, let's say, decade, Evan?
Yeah, well, first of all, I see a lot of customers and friendly faces in the audience live today. So hello, good to see you all. Um, I think it's interesting that question actually, because I think a lot of the times in legal we talk about perhaps contracting and CLM and there's a big part of I think legal operations which is beyond that. In fact, it's probably one step before that, which is to your point, the legal intake and the reporting piece. And I think that's actually become more and more important in recent days. I think your question was like, how has it evolved?
That's it.
And I think it's if you think about if you rewind all the way back, many years ago, and as teams start off small, what you often see is you have a single GC or a small team, and people are most likely coming to legal just by sending an email or maybe walking up to the desk back in the office and making the request that way. And that's fine if your teams are small, but as you scale, as you get to teams of 6, 10, 15, and for some of us, hundreds, that method is just not a viable method to go. And so we often see that has evolved, that intake process from kind of tapping your favorite lawyer on the shoulder to the central inbox. Like someone puts in a legal at companyxyz.com. And that kind of has worked for some organizations, but hasn't for most. I think the challenge there is people, send things into that email, but it's still a distribution list. So either everyone's getting it, and it's kind of like, who's got this one? And there's a bit of confusion there. Or you have someone like an administrator or legal ops, unfortunately, manually triaging requests from that inbox as well. And so that's not always been the best. Not to mention the reporting piece, right? You don't get any reporting from email. You don't get reporting from the centralized inbox. And so I would say about maybe, maybe 3 to 5-ish, 6-ish at most years ago, the concept of the legal front door, I think, as a label emerged in the industry, and people were using workflow to build like a form on a page that people would go to, fill in a form and submit requests. And that was pretty good for many customers as well. But I think now, as we talk about 2024 and we're about to step into 2025, and with the advent of AI, I think there's been another big leap, a big step from that legal front door concept into the next age of legal intake. And that to me is meeting the business where they are. Because the biggest resistance I think I've seen in the last few years around getting people to rally around this centralized legal front door concept is you're changing the business behavior, sometimes of thousands, tens of thousands of people. And that's a really big change management task for legal to push onto the business, which they've spent so many years building a great relationship for, right? So I think we'll probably get into it more throughout this webinar, so I won't go too deep into it, but AI plays a really, really important role in now being able to allow the legal team to actually take requests within Slack, within Teams, within email, and people can just ask legal questions that they've always asked all these years, and for AI to actually interpret the request, to triage, to create the self-service, to actually even create some of the matters or tickets, if people don't shudder at the word of tickets used in the context of legal. I know we don't want to be an IT ticketing system.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we'll say matters. But
Yep.
AI now plays a very interesting role in being able to embed the point in which requests happen where the business has always lived, in SharePoint, in Salesforce, in these communication tools, and be able to automatically create these matters to be able to field these to the right person.
You said a lot. I've been taking notes. You've said a lot of really good things here that I want to touch on. First of all, one of the I think the unintended consequences of the old fashioned way of like work comes into a department is it, and it's very negative, is you end up, and we've seen this time and time again, lawyer shopping, where people find a lawyer who always says yes to them, or it's a lawyer they like working with, and they end up bombarding that lawyer, right? And for better or for worse, I mean, maybe that lawyer is doing a great job, but it's just not the right way to get the work done. And so a great thing, a great result of having an intake system is it goes to the right person. It goes to who it's supposed to be going to, right? So just having the work come in, first of all, meeting the threshold of, yes, this does belong in legal to begin with. If it's something like, that doesn't, then, it's a good way to say, no, this is something you can handle on your own. We're not looking at, whatever this $2,500 contracts anymore. So making sure, ensuring that it meets the threshold to come to legal, then it gets routed properly. I think that's so important. And right there, just doing that alone, you're going to see major efficiencies. And then the other thing is, we hear all the time, like no IT ticketing system. Like you see GCs and not legal ops professionals less because they have more tolerance for this, but GCs that kind of go white. They're like, we spent years building our relationships and we white glove everything. And it's so important for us to have that relationship. And we agree. And that's why this is so important, because the point is to get the work done the right way by the right resource or person. And then you have more time to spend white gloving things and doing the more strategic work. So this part of the intake, that front door is so critical in order to save time really and get very quick answers, questions answered very quickly, because that's, people don't need white gloved, it would tell me where the template is kind of thing, right? So I totally agree with that. And then you talked about
Yeah.
matter management. Oh yeah, please, sir. You're
Oh no,
to that.
I was going to say it's all of that. It's interesting because there's an efficiency piece, but I also see a big trend of people putting in legal in intake for reporting as well. Like it's sort of two sides of the same coin, because often when GCs want the data and legal ops wants that operating ability to be metrics driven, you realize actually the only way you can get the data is if I mean, the only way you can get reporting is if you have the data, and the way you have the data is intake. So it always goes back to, are we actually capturing the right information and the complete information in order to even create those dashboards or those metrics? And so
Yes.
sort of both kind of outcomes lead back to efficiency and visibility lead back to legal intake.
100%. Yeah, you literally took the words out of my mouth. That was the last point I wanted to make, was this idea of this, what you could kind of think of almost as a passive matter management, right? Where you're getting all of this data where you're never going to get attorneys to track time, nor should they, or like, manually input a lot of information. You might get a quick, this is the thing I'm working on, but nor should they be spending their time doing that. So this is such a great way to get this matter management, basically, which we, frankly, 25 years of doing this in-house, and I've never been successful, really, really successful implementing a matter management system where you could get all kinds of details about matters where they manually had to do that. So tell us a little bit about visibility, Evan, and why that's so important and what you're seeing and now.
So I speak to I have the privilege of being able to speak to sort of GCs and CLOs all the time in my job, and I often see and I'm seeing this more and more really in the last year or two, this theme of visibility popping up. I think there's three reasons that I often hear from them. It might be one or two or three in combination. One is operational. So for I think when you think about legal as a department, we've come a long way in the last few years, right? We've gone from traditionally being industry that is outside counsel driven. We've brought that in-house. We've then learned to become not just an in-house law firm, but actually a peer and a very important strategic part, just like the HR team, just like the commercial team, just like the procurement team, just a part of operating a well-run business. And part of that is, how do we then operate legal like a business unit as well? And I think visibility is a big part to that. I think usually it ties into things like resource allocation is a very key sub-theme of that. I was speaking with a GC that operates in 3 different jurisdictions, and they basically had teams in each of those regions supporting the local sort of businesses. The challenge with them was they would have at times spike in demand in one jurisdiction and very low demand in another. And because they didn't have the visibility of what each part was working on and how much, they couldn't effectively redistribute some of the workload across their shared service model. And so, operationally, I think being able to see, what people are working on and how much gives the ability for legal leaders to be able to better allocate resources and operate in that way. It's also a way to actually identify efficiency. So let's say you have data that says, hey, it turns out you're spending 30% of your time answering questions about gifts and entertainment, or maybe it's 15% of your time doing NDAs. Like that's a lot of time. If you multiply that by, let's say, a legal team of, let's just say 10, that's 15% of 10 people's work day. That's a lot of days of lawyers gone into just doing NDAs. And so it also presents opportunities for maybe process improvement or better training, or maybe even areas of automation. So that's one big theme, or operational. The other one is around value. I think this is a big one as well, right? It's sometimes hard to justify why legal is spending X amount of dollars on outside counsel and still have, in-house headcount, and the reason and the fact that we need even more headcount as the business scales as well. And so having the data to show that we are actually at capacity, we're actually doing a lot of throughput, and we're adding a lot of value to the business by supporting X dollars in transactions, it gives the GC and us at Legal Ops also to the ability to say, actually, because the business has grown 2x in, whatever the size, and the transaction volume coming through to legal has 3x in the last 2 years, we have the same headcount. We actually need to hire more in this specific area in order to not become a bottleneck to enable the business to continue growing. So I see value being a very big piece as well. And then the last one is probably around risk. So for some organizations, you'll have things like maybe customer claims or subpoenas or court dates and fines and things like that have a very tight timeline, or maybe it's commercial in nature and there's a certain deadline for a contract renewal. But these kind of deadlines, being able to have visibility over them, track them, filter, and prioritize will also allow legal teams to not miss critical deadlines that might have reputational damage or monetary implications. Sometimes we speak to big tech companies and they might even get shut off in a particular market if they don't respond to a government inquiry soon enough, right? And so there's a lot of ramifications for that. So visibility is those three themes. I've been speaking for a while. What do you think? Have you seen anything different, Steph?
No, I mean, I think, one of the things, looking at it, even if you take a step back and really look at it from a strategic perspective, I spend a lot of time talking to GCs and legal teams about getting away from the conversation of, oh, look, we saved 10% on outside counsel kind of a thing, which that's kind of table stakes now. You have to show that you're efficient, and outside counsel is a great way to definitely show hard dollar savings. But that is absolutely not what you want to lead with. You really have to lead with value. And if you pigeonhole yourself into this, hey, we're I know we spend a lot of money, but look how hard we're trying to save money. You are a cost center, and that is how they're going to look at
Mm.
you. And then good luck getting the resources you need to get anything done. And frankly, the respect that legal teams deserve. You really have to position yourself as a business facilitator. How am I getting revenue in the door faster? How am I helping my, businesses enter new markets? Or how are we, let's pretend that your growth strategy is growth through M&A activity. How are we making these deals happen faster? So that's where legal teams really can add value. We're going to help you do this in a legal and ethical way and protect the company, but we're going to make sure that revenue is getting in the door faster. And the only way you can tell that story is through data. And so I couldn't agree with you more, to the extent that you could show that, hey, we've reduced cycle times. We've put, all of this out to self-help so people can answer questions very easily. And because of that, we've been able to focus our time on the M&A activity or whatever, which is so much higher value than, again, answering questions about travel policy or whatever we get stuck in, right? And this is where AI, I think, can be such a help, and the data can really show that we're moving in this direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually why I think the reporting piece or the visibility we've been talking about go hand in hand with efficiency, because to your point, like you could have a data story around becoming more efficient, but actually it's more so you put in the efficiency so that you can get rid of all of the work that bogs you down, that doesn't actually enable the business to move quicker and enter those, more strategic markets or those areas of revenue. So the efficiency kind of gives you the space and time, and then the reporting then reflects where you've reallocated that time to add that business value. So it sort of goes hand in hand in sort of that efficiency through the reporting piece. Yeah.
100%. And that's where ops professionals can really shine, because this is where we're trained, or we can certainly learn. We have skill sets that will help us learn how to tell the story, when we are able to capture that data. So the GCs never, they dashboards are incredible. And if you could build dashboards to show the GC what's going on, they're going to love that. But the reality is, I think it's up to the legal ops professional to really help them tell that story. And that's where we can really kind of cement our positions, I think, within our departments too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. I'm curious what you've seen specifically with reporting and AI, Evan, with some of the clients that you've worked with, and, how, maybe tell a story about how data has really helped a client.
Yeah, so one of our clients is a big like FMCG, so fast moving consumer good company, and so there was a let's call it pre-automation, pre-technology world, and then post. Pre-technology world, they were doing everything manually, from NDAs to legal intake to marketing reviews, like really the full gambit. And the challenge for them is their business was actually growing fantastic, right? Like there's all these different business dynamics that will sort of justify or be the driver for technology. For them, it was growth. So that's a great story. But the challenge, like most legal teams, is that the headcount was not scaling as quickly as the business. And so that's really where they had to turn to look at things like technology and automation to get some efficiencies where headcount wasn't scaling as quickly. And so with the sort of technology implemented, they also implemented a dashboard that had on one sort of graph the measure of the amount of work growing over time. So that was one story, the amount of work coming into legal over time. And on another graph, something that was quite unique, it was the first time I saw it in that case, which was how we handled the work. So that was not so much where it came from, but how we handled it. And it had three sections. One section was we handled it with lawyers, just like we always have. Another section was we handled it with self-service. So I think you mentioned it earlier, self-help. And then there was another one which was like hybrid. So they called it no touch, low touch, and I guess just high touch legal. And the idea was that when they put the two graphs together, the increase in work and the amount of work that was handled by each of those buckets, they could tell a very interesting story to say, hey, the business has actually increased in work volume coming into legal. Our headcount hasn't scaled accordingly in the same sort of proportion, but we've been able to create more output to be able to shorten the cycle times and move quicker and become a better and more efficient legal operating function because we've implemented self-help and technology. So it was a very interesting use of different sort of metrics to then paint a very particular story to not only show the value of legal, but show the value of the innovation and the investment that legal has made into technology as well. So I thought that was super interesting.
That is fascinating. Yeah, that's a great story. I think, you know, I look, I'm being honest with the audience. It's foolish of us to think that legal teams can continue to behave the same way they behaved for the last 25 years when in reality I'm seeing GCs now getting pressure to, what are you they're being asked, what are you doing in terms of implementing AI? CEOs, CFOs, they are seeing the studies that are coming out of all of, these larger companies that are deploying Gen AI specifically too. And it's coming, it's here. And to the extent I always tell clients and anybody who I'm working with, like, to the extent that you can get ahead of it and do this on your own terms rather than it being imposed on you. First of all, you look better. You look, so much more innovative, and you look like you're doing the right thing for the company. But also, you have full control over it. So rather than waiting for, the big ugly consulting company to come in, not like Up Level, we're the sweet cuddly consulting company, but like one of the big companies to come in and say, hey, your legal team is spending 40%. You need to cut your budget by 40%. And believe me, this happens all the time. That's not hyperbolic. Like, we see this. Instead, exactly like this department that you're talking about, Evan, if you get your arms around it and be proactive and do this and saying, look, we're innovating. This is how we're producing more. I hate to say more with less because I think that's so demotivating, but you're producing more value all while doing the things that let's be honest, they have to get done. People have to answer, or somebody has to answer questions on policies.
Yes.
And it has to be very simple, or else employees are going to ignore it, or, just, bypass it and do what they want to do anyway. So these things, compliance has to happen, but how do you do it in such a way where you're not using valuable attorney resources in order to do that? And so that's a really powerful story.
Mm.
Oh, can I ask a question? Because somebody posted a great one in the chat.
Yeah.
Because we deal with this all the time at Up Level. What is the value proposition for using a tool like Checkbox versus an enterprise tool like a ServiceNow?
So
So
good.
yeah, I have some
That's a
thoughts
great
on it.
question.
Yeah, it's a great, we
Yeah.
talk about it all the time. So go ahead, Evan. What do you have
It's a
to say about
great question, and thanks, Jen. I think I have a few thoughts around this. I think let's just pick up on one of the very first things, Steph, you and I talked about at the start of this webinar, which is this concept of like an IT ticketing system. Because I think IT teams in the enterprise will always have tools that can solve legal problems. I mean, that's the whole point of IT, is to have enterprise-wide, horizontal, like widely applicable tools in the same way that you could probably solve for some CLM type use cases or repository with SharePoint and other enterprise tools. And same thing with like e-billing. You could probably use a finance system, but we all know that it doesn't do it very well. And there's certain nuances to legal that make it challenging. But let's start with that first point, which is, there are many tools out there, Jira, ServiceNow, maybe even SharePoint lists. That can do some of the job. I think one of the trade-offs, though, is that those tools are built for a different audience. They're built for IT, and they tend to be very transactional, which is fine because for IT, often the requests that they get are pretty low complexity relative to legal. Okay, it's kind of like I can't log into my Okta SSO, right? As opposed to legal, which is very context rich. And the tools that are built for legal are more focused on that relationship piece. It's about maintaining the relationship and actually providing that counsel all the way through, as opposed to it just like getting through tickets, so to speak. So there's a user experience piece, I think, that is quite different when you look at an IT built tool versus a legal, built for purpose tool. So that's one bucket, user experience. The other one, which might be a deal breaker for some tools, in fact, is confidentiality, sensitivity, like access control. Because in legal, we deal with things like labor disputes, right? Like employment and people. We deal with strategic projects and M&A, right? We deal with litigation. And often if we use a tool that's owned by someone else and legal isn't the sole custodian of that, then there's going to be some leakage when it comes to access to pretty sensitive information. And so that's a governance issue. The final bucket I'd put it in is legal, again, is unique in that our workflows actually change quite a lot, probably more than IT. I'm going to use them as an example for now. Yeah. Because how often will an IT workflow change? Probably not as much as a regulatory change in the market or the business growth moving into new markets, which then result in new legal considerations and capabilities. And so in legal, we actually need to be a lot more nimble in the way that we manage our tools and adjust them and customize them. And often a lot of the IT tools, they're, again, built for IT, you often need some level of technical ability or developer or maybe even coding to customize workflows to, even change some basic content, say on a form. And legal will ironically have to submit a ticket to IT to make those changes. And that change is too slow and we end up at the back of the queue again. And we all know how that feels in lining up for that change. And so I would say those are the three key things. That's like user experience, governance, and then control and flexibility and agility over maintaining what is a dynamic environment that legal works in. But Steph, what have you seen?
That's exactly what we've seen with our clients. That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say a lack of flexibility with the enterprise tools, and then control. Those are the two main reasons where we try to steer clients if they have the ability to go to a tool like Checkbox that is designed for legal workflow specifically. You can, it's you obviously you have to be trained in how to use Checkbox, but you can control your workflows. You can add new workflows very easily. The matter level kind of security is really critical and all of that. I think, Jen, one of the things to go a little bit deeper on your question about ServiceNow is a lot of times we'll tell clients, it's kind of a sticky situation, right? Because if you're using a chit, basically, if you buy a tool that's not that's something similar is available on the enterprise level, but you want to go with something that's unique to legal. And so what we find is where you have to, it can be a little political. So you have to decide whether or not, you want your GC to kind of fight for that tool. So what we often say is you can start with a ServiceNow type or a Jira type of tool that's available. Build out, have IT build out one or two very, very simple workflows, like how to request an NDA or something like that. You can start there. Very quickly, both of you will see that it's very limited, right? So I have clients who've done the best they can do building out both SharePoint and because there is workflow obviously available in Microsoft, and there are tools out there, right? So I've had clients build out a few of them, and then very quickly IT figures out, first of all, that they don't want to support legal in doing this because we're kind of a pain and we have a bunch of different workflow needs other than even HR, other departments internally. And so both of you will come to the realization pretty quickly that you've maxed out your abilities within those tools. But it's, if you want to be a good team player, and we should be, right? We all work within corporations and have rules and all of that. You can certainly try and see how far you can get, and then you'll know very quickly once you've reached the maximum maturity in those tools and need to explore something else. And then try to bring IT along on the journey. We often encourage clients, bring IT, have IT sit in on these demos and see how these tools are built out and how much more flexible and useful they are, how much better the reporting is, all of it that you get on the back end too.
Yeah,
Right.
actually, Steph, you mentioned like being a very good business partner. One of the like I've we've been in so many of these situations where it's like checkbox versus an enterprise tool, and so I've seen how those play out. One of the things I would provide as an advice to people listening in, if you're facing this challenge with your tools, bringing in legal specific tools, is like if you put yourself in the shoes of the IT person, like how do they like to operate and evaluate these types of situations, right? If we come to them and we say, oh, I want a legal specific tool because legal is unique and there's just unique needs, and I get we have ServiceNow, but I want something else, that's probably not going to be as effective as what I've seen work really well is putting together a high level list of requirements of the system that you're looking for. Because I find over the years, the trap of going to IT with some sort of high level label. If you call something a repository and you're like, I'm looking for a repository for legal, or I'm looking for workflow for legal, they'll say, we have a workflow tool in IT. We have a repository in IT. And you end up
Yes.
getting stuck at the label level. You need to go one level deeper, which is like, we are looking for X tech category of technology, but these are the requirements that we want. These are the must-haves and the should-haves, and this is why it's important. And you send that across to IT, and you basically fill it out for the vendor that you're looking for, and then you ask them to fill it out for, let's say, ServiceNow. We've been using them as an example, ServiceNow, and they'll see very
No
quickly,
offense to
like,
anybody who's
yeah,
from
no,
ServiceNow here and there.
no
Yeah.
offense. Big fan of the company. They're a great company, and I
Right.
have friends who work there. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so like then it becomes a method of evaluating technology that they're actually used to. That we're speaking their language, and if one of the things is the ability to like for legal to self administer and quickly spin up a workflow, very quickly they'll realize, oh, actually, ServiceNow probably doesn't meet this, and you know, it's almost like you're
Yeah.
writing an RFP internally back for IT.
It's and Rebecca just messaged us in the channel as well and said exactly the same thing. It's having that requirements document and not to preach to you all, but you all should be doing that with any technology type of thing that you're doing. You've got to document those requirements because that, first of all, you're speaking in the same language as IT, right? When you go to them with a requirements document, they know what that means and they're used to looking at that. And
Mm.
so just like Evan said, like you really do have to speak to them in their own language. You can't say I need something specific to legal. It's just not a good, just like legal, going back to what story is legal telling, what value are we bringing the company. You want to talk in that same language when you're asking for resources, right? And so I think that's exactly right. Start with what your requirements are, and if they think their tool can do it, great, try it, and then see how far that gets you. And I think both people will come to the realization that but it maxes out very quickly on what it can actually do for legal teams. This is from my experience, and I know my team feels exactly the same way. And Brian on my team helped build out some of these workflow tools, and we put it this way: when a client comes to us and says we have to use an enterprise tool, we're always like, oh, that's gonna be hard. Let's see how
It's
far
gonna
we
be
can
hard.
take it. But
Yeah,
good. Yeah, and like Lynn said, let IT be the advisor and the enabler, and if you bring them along in the journey with you, they will be, and they'll soon figure it out and advocate, I think, on your behalf.
exactly.
Yeah, good. Let's talk a little bit, Evan, about culture within legal teams and how lawyers work, and the topic of burnout. I think so much
Mm.
data has come out showing that, I have a ton of anecdotal data just from working with legal teams over the years. What I see is work comes in into legal teams, you've got a bunch of really diligent, very smart people, right? In a team. These are high performers, they're highly educated. The work comes in and they're going to do whatever work hits their plates, right? And so, and then when they get so, overwhelmed, then they just start offloading to outside counsel and using outside counsel as kind of overflow, which is not a great way to use a very expensive resource, right? It's not a strategic way to use outside counsel. In an ideal world, there's a threshold of what work even comes into legal, right? You've got client enablement set up so that they can answer a lot of their own stuff before they come to legal. And then you've cleared some space, and you can augment even the legal team through partners like ALSPs and all of that, and clear space so that they can focus on more strategic things. But if they are constantly on this hamster wheel, and just doing whatever hits their plates, that's what lawyers do. They're going to burn out. So tell me a little bit about like what you see in this space and how can a tool really help them and help legal ops kind of, be the hero of the department, basically.
Yeah, I think you've described it really well, because I think as lawyers, we want to be helpful. We want to be great business partners. And so it's as much as we get told that we're the Department of No, I actually think lawyers generally actually say yes, because we want to, like when something comes in, we want to be helpful, we want to be quick. But to your point, if we say yes to everything, and that's the challenge of saying yes to everything, is that then our queue becomes really very large. And unfortunately, legal is one of those, I see it similar to many other functions where we're not actually fully in control of our own workload. Like the work that makes its way into our queue is determined by other people. Like the commercial team wants a contract reviewed, or the marketing team wants a copy reviewed, right? And so it's interesting because we're not in full control over our own workload. And so very quickly you can see why people burn out. Like you have this increasing, infinite, never-ending pile of things that you're working on. You push out that one thing, and the next thing comes on, and it can be a bit of a hamster wheel, as you say, a bit of a grind. I think the way that you solve for it is, so prioritization is a skill, but it's also often a product by having the right systems in place. Now, I think it's hard when you have multiple lawyers in a team to have that system in place without, say, technology. You could have stand-ups. I've seen structures where you have like a daily or a weekly stand-up, and maybe legal ops or the GC plays, like say the Scrum Master, and you're looking at the total amount of work, and you allocate and you balance day to day or week to week. So you can do it without technology, but I think self-service plays a big piece, and I think having like this automatic routing system plays a very big piece as well. I'm actually thinking of sharing my screen. I'll run the risk of like breaking the flow here, but do you mind if I share my screen and show one slide?
Go
I
for
think
it.
let's give this a try. Because I'd like to use
While
this
you're
slide.
sharing too, I'll tell the audience that there's a resources tab on the bottom of your screen, and Checkbox has put quite a few resources available for everybody. So while Evan is
Oh, cool.
pulling this up, just know that there are resources that Checkbox has posted for people. So anybody who wants to download those or whatever, click the resources. Oh, and also I just see a poll pop up now. Um, so the poll is there. Okay, good. Oh yeah. So Evan, you
Great.
can see what folks are how they're answering.
Yeah, sounds good. I think so. I've already closed the polls, but if people are answering that, I think how it's set up is if you want to continue the conversation,
I'll tell you
there's an
what I
option to do
see. Yeah.
that.
They would like to learn a little bit. The 86% are saying they'd like to learn a little bit more about
Okay,
Checkbox's intake and matter management.
perfect. All
So we
right, that
can
sounds good.
share your screen and then we'll jump right to that. How about that?
Great, sounds good. Is my
Okay, perfect. I'm
screen
going
is
to
my
end the
screen
poll.
being shared right now on yours?
It is indeed.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Here, I'll show the
So
results so people can see.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
So this is actually my favorite slide that I use. I say it's my favorite because it's the crowd's favorite. I think in a nutshell, people really understand how you could operate sort of the request management for legal. And so your question is like, if there's burnout happening because every single thing that comes in hits a lawyer's desk and they're just churning and burning through it, How do we better manage this? And I see it like this. So the first thing is, imagine a request comes in. It doesn't matter from what channel. Again, the whole point of 2024, and we're about to enter 2025, the whole point is that we're going to meet the business where they are. That's super important because, Steph, you said before, like you've tried matter management before years ago, and it's really hard to adopt because you're effectively asking the lawyers to fill in a timesheet. Maybe it's not a timesheet like it is in private practice, but you're effectively creating a matter, selecting fields, and populating information, and that's really hard to do. Or you're getting the business to go to this new sort of bookmark page. The goal here, in the modern way of doing it, is you're in Teams, you're in Slack, you're in email, you're in Salesforce and SharePoint, and someone just writes a natural language question. Like, let's just make one up. Let's say it's I'm planning. Let's say I'm a sales rep. I'm planning to fly a client in and take them out to a nice dinner. Is this allowed? So what we want to do is not have that go straight to a lawyer, to your point. The first thing is, can we solve it with self-help? And if the answer or the response involves an answer, and we have AI today that can do a pretty good job at this. I know Lynn's on the call. He's launched a few chatbots on Checkbox and he's done a fantastic job there.
Lynn, yeah.
Yeah. But this is where, you can answer questions around policy, whether that's contract policies or regulatory policies. It could answer questions even about how you can use an existing tool, whether it's your CLM or your e-billing tool. I'm sure we get a lot of questions around how do I submit a budget? Where do I find this contract? Like the AI does a really good job at answering questions, again, straight in Slack. So they're not having to leave Slack. They're in Slack getting the answers there. But with my example of the $200, maybe it says, hey, because the gift of flying someone in and taking them out for dinner is above $200, you do in fact, that's in fact against our policies. Now, let's say this sales rep was a bit quick on his feet, and he or she says, well, actually, I've already done it. Whoops.
Whoops.
Whoops, it's already happened. What do I do now? And so then the technology can say, well, okay, fair enough. Now we need to get a policy exception or at least register this on record for compliance. And so now it's no longer an answer, it's a process. And so the tool is able to take that person after giving it the policy answer, take them into a process where it says, well, because you're a salesperson in this geography and it is within the last 30 days, then we need XYZ people to approve and be aware of it and then post it into our, maybe register for this kind of stuff. And so that's where it leads into more of a workflow self-service, where we're going from point A to point B, right? That's what a workflow is. It's going from
yeah, Gen AI is so powerful, but Gen AI plus workflow is infinitely more powerful. Yeah.
You got it. Yeah, I would say AI is really good at the kind of unstructured communications, like the conversation-based type stuff. Really great for knowledge management. But AI by its nature is not a good use case for when you want to codify business rules and logic. You don't want the AI to be making up who needs to approve things, right? Like that's a set of rules, and that's where workflow comes into play. And if you can have them connected together, you can see how you can create that journey of going from an answer to a process, collect the approvals. And then let's say, Steph, that let's say the head of sales says, oh, actually, this is a bit shady because this is not just any client, this is a government client, and we've been slapped on the wrist before for not, doing things properly with government bodies. Let's bring in a lawyer. And so that's when we might then need a solve with people. It goes out of self-service, out of technology, but now we have all the intake data and all the context that we can then automatically create a matter with all of the information populated, auto categorization of that matter, and the auto assignment of that matter. So that, again, going back to the days of old matter management where lawyers had to fill in a whole bunch of information, those days are gone, right? The information that's captured from AI and workflow automatically create the correct matter. So that the reporting around all of this is also automated as well. So that's kind of how I see like this on a screen, on a page, is what is possible, as opposed to the alternative, which you mentioned, is like people are just getting work in this ever-growing queue and not knowing how to prioritize.
Exactly. It leads to Orkin asked a question in our chat about whether or not we think that because they pass the bar, these tools pass the bar exam and they do it better
Mm,
than attorneys, right? Or attorneys to be, I should say, in many cases. And what does that mean for the practice of law? But exactly as you just demonstrated, I think this is going to be the case for all professional services. So CPAs, doctors, lawyers, this applies to all professionals. They're not going to go away, but they will be aided by AI. And what I mean by and I will
mm,
say, I don't think the AI is going to replace these professions, at least not in the next 10 years or whatever. But professionals who harness this technology will replace the ones who do not. I am pretty
mm,
confident when I say that. The reason I say that, Evan, is, as you know, I had to suffer through a surgery earlier this year where I had to get a total hip replacement. The doctor used an AI machine to take all the measurements, made sure that the implant they put in was the right size, and blah blah blah. I had 100% successful recovery. Like, I am good to go,
mm.
back to martial arts and all of that good stuff again. And frankly, if I had to do it again, I'm not going to a doctor who is not going to use that machine, right? Like, I
Mm,
want the AI help because I want to rely on a machine that's doing the calculations, and then the doctor too, and his brains, of course. So, and I would think the same thing with lawyers. Like, if I can get it, even using a GPT myself, right? If I could get it for, let's say I'm starting a new business or whatever, if I could get it 85% there and then bring in a lawyer at the end, first of all, that's going to save me a ton of money. And so we're going to see, I think, a reduction in the crisis of access to justice that we have in this country and all over the world because lawyers are so expensive. But I think
mm.
that this is really it's not going to supplant lawyers, but it's really going to aid them and help them be more efficient and more affordable. That's my take on it. Is that what you're thinking too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you talk about it. I think maybe it was in the question, practice of law, because when I think about AI and maybe some of the resistance or the fear of trying and building capability against AI, I often think about AI actually playing two different roles in legal. It's either in the practice of law, like AI changes fundamentally the practice of law, or it's actually changing the business of law or the operations of law. And so when you give your example of like your medical procedure, like the AI isn't doing the doctoring. It's not doing the actual medical judgment. It's just doing the measurements. In the same way that when I think about AI, yes, there is AI today attempting, like in the case of passing the bar exam, it's attempting to apply legal reasoning and the practice of law. And there's a whole bunch of use cases there, and that's probably the area that scares actually a lot of lawyers. But there's also a whole universe of use cases that isn't about the practice of law. That is AI. That is enabling efficiencies and
Yeah.
visibility and all the things that we talk about. That is really just handling the administrative, process-driven elements of law, so that the lawyers can be lawyers. And so if you're on the fence about like, should I like, what are the right risk levels we have around getting into AI? Just know that there's a whole other bucket where it's not about the
Yes.
AI doing law, it's about the AI helping with the practice
Very
or
well.
the sorry, not the
Yeah,
practice, the
very well
business and
said.
operation. Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
well said. And I think, to the question of like, will it ever get licensed? I think I think every, like, the bar associations would turn over, like they would just like freak out if there's such a, like a push in, at least in our country, to, stay away from the unauthorized practice of law. And practicing law is, it's kind of a guild, right? The bar
Mm,
association. So
yes.
I can't imagine that this stuff is ever going to get licensed. Who knows? I don't know.
Mm,
I cannot predict what's going to happen after the next 10 years, but certainly I think in the next 5, 10 years, we'll see it aiding, and helping lawyers, but certainly not supplanting them. And like Evan said, like, a lot of it is the business and practice, not the substantive practice, but the operational practice, which I think is exactly right. Evan, we have somebody in the audience who raised their hands. I'm going to allow them to talk. Melissa, I'm going
let's
to
do
click
it.
on allow to talk. This is kind of a new platform for us. So let's see how it goes. If you could take yourself off mute and go ahead and ask your question. You're still on mute, just so you know. I'll give you one more second to figure it out. No? Okay. So let's see now. How do I
Oh, apparently there's no way to unmute. Um,
oh no. Okay, then I guess
we can also,
maybe just chat us. Type it in the chat. What a bummer. Okay. There's no way to unmute. Oh, what a bummer. Yeah, Melissa, send it in chat and we'll address it. See, this is new Zoom features as we're learning for the
Yeah.
webinar. Most of them are pretty cool, but yeah, that's okay. That's something we'll have to look into if they can't unmute themselves.
Yeah, but
Um,
I'm loving the engagement from the audience here. We've got a full chat and Q&A going. I think someone even asked for the product cost. Probably not the right forum for that, Michael. So we'll maybe connect afterwards around the cost.
yeah, you have to set up a meeting with Evan and then he'll tell you. I will tell you it's a lot more affordable than implementing like these enterprise systems. And in fact, it's
Mm,
why we typically, and I shouldn't say typically, but in many cases, we've got clients coming to us and they're we end up working with some smaller legal departments. They need legal operations because they don't have bodies, right? So to absorb work. So they really have to be super efficient. And so they'll come to us and say, we need a CLM. Like our contracting is a mess. We need a CLM. And what we often end up finding with them is actually they need some process improvements. They need, templates harmonized and all of that. And then a good workflow tool with a repository is what's going to really solve 95% of their needs rather than trying to implement a very expensive CLM. So that's why we are big fans of Checkbox. We end up working with them a lot because it's just we try to push people towards kind of the lowest common denominator when it comes to technology, just because we know it's so hard to get people to adopt big systems.
mm.
Um, Evan, what else? We have about 6 minutes left. I don't know if I missed anything in the chat. I think we addressed most of the issues, but if there's anything else, please let us know. But I know that you have quite a few things coming up for 2025. You've got a lot of new features that you're doing enhancements with regards to your platform. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, a bit of a teaser, I guess. I think someone at the very beginning, I think it was Nadia, was saying we started with a cliffhanger, so we'll end with a cliffhanger as well. How about that? So it's an exciting time, I think, first of all, to be in legal and legal operations because especially with AI colliding with legal tech, there's so much that is possible now. When we talked about the first question around like the evolution of legal intake and reporting, and I took us through that journey from like tapping the shoulder of your favorite lawyer to the shared inbox to the legal front door. Now we're at a place where Gen AI and workflow tools working together can really enable more of like I don't use the word co-pilot. I'm actually starting to use the phrase co-counsel in some sense of uh, like having not just a chatbot where I think we've seen this in the last 12 months, right? There's a lot of use cases where you have a chatbot that answers a series of questions. Like we have that too, a checkbox. There's a lot of value there. But I think the next level that you'll see from us coming out early next year is the ability for it to have clarifying questions and conversations. Again, the whole principle is to be in Slack, in Teams and email, and not just have it as a ask a question, get an answer, but really to truly understand what information do we need to either create a matter or to give the right information or to kick off a workflow and to have that conversation and fill in the gaps and have that AI have that sort of very dynamic conversation, and then be able to automatically from conversation extract out the key subject, auto categorize what it is, auto assign it as well. So that's all actually already in beta here at Checkbox. We're testing it with some people at the moment. So if you want to get an early sneak peek, I know you do, Steph, so we're going to get you on that list. But
Mhm.
like anyone here who wants to kind of get a sneak peek before it goes live, you can reach out right now. It's already sort of demo ready. But we're going to go formally like public launch with that in February 2025. So I think we'll be running another like announcement product demo-esque webinar in February. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll send maybe an invite to that as a follow-up to everyone here. But that would be an exciting moment for us to connect that picture that you saw with the three diagrams with the three different like buckets. It's all like Checkbox already does that, but now we're going to have AI play an even more important role in enabling that model and making it more natural for the business. And really, our goal, Steph, this is my 2025 for prediction into the future. Okay, so you can mark my words on this. I think the form is going to be dead. And at Checkbox, our goal is to kill the form, in the sense of forms have served us for ages, and it's really great to get structured data. But I think with AI, we can probably skip through that step that is often very valuable, but actually still pretty high friction for the people who need to engage in it. So maybe one day, in the same way that Salesforce many, many years ago, when they were building their company against Siebel, they came out and said, what do they call it? It was like kill software or something. They were like, we're going to get rid of software. They were talking about on-premise.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Checkbox,
I
we're going to come
remember
out and
that.
say, we're going to kill the form.
Kill the
So
form.
yeah, and
I
disrupt
love it.
ourselves. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. And it's, that we've always had a need for this, right? There's nobody on this call who wouldn't find this exciting and valuable. And I think we're living in a time where finally the tech is catching up to our needs, and like
Yes.
what we've wanted forever, like real knowledge management,
Yes.
the real ability to connect the dots and not just be like, okay, if A, then B, and then C kind of a thing, where it can really, understand context and get us to the right resource or place or whatever. So that's very exciting. And then, like you said, throwing in the complexity of like, oop, yeah, you're not allowed to do this. Oops, I already did it. Now what, kind of a thing. And then tying it all together without having to send a bunch of emails. People, we live in our inboxes right now and try to piece things together just from, based on what was that last message I sent and what's the status of this. And it's just untenable. And
Mm,
so this is really exciting to have it all tied together like that.
exactly. Yeah, no, it's
I
exciting
love
times
it.
ahead. Thank you for being on the
Mhm.
journey, and everyone else who's watching along as well. Whether it's old faces or new faces, thanks for being on the journey. This is exciting times.
Absolutely. All right. Well, anything else, Evan? Any last thoughts?
No, I think it's been a really fun conversation, Steph. We always have great fun here. And at some point, like you said, we got to make our way into the karaoke room so I can show off my very amateur singing and dancing skills. So we'll make
I'm
that
an
happen.
amateur singer and dancer too, so I think we've thrown down the gauntlet. We got it. I'm an amateur guitar player too, so if we really
Oh,
want to
good.
wow people with our horrible skills, we can
I,
we
I,
can do that.
I think I can play 5 chords, which gives me enough to play some basic
Any rock
songs.
song,
So yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. All
That's
right,
amazing. All
awesome,
right, you guys. Yeah, great. Thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And Evan, I always love talking to you. Always such a great time.
amazing. All right, thanks, Steph. Thanks everyone who attended.
Thanks,
Speak soon,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye now.